"Give me the money tomorrow or your new car is gone," my daughter demanded, ordering me to hand over $100,000 to pay her husband's debts. I smiled and said, "Okay." When they came to collect the money, I left a surprise at the door. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought my own daughter would stand in my living room and threaten to destroy the one thing that still brought me joy. Lili walked through my front door that Tuesday afternoon without knocking, the way she always did these days. Behind her, Michael strutted in like he owned the place, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, that familiar smirk plastered across his face. I was sitting in my recliner going through the mail when they barged in. "Dad, we need to talk," Lili said, not bothering with pleasantries. Her voice had that sharp edge I'd grown to dread over the past 2 years since she married Michael. I set down the stack of bills and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. When had she become so hard, so cold? The sweet girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and curl up next to me to watch cartoons had been replaced by the stranger who only visited when she needed something. "What's wrong now?" I asked, though I already knew this wasn't a social call. Michael stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Lili like some kind of bodyguard. "Benjamin, we've got a situation," he said, using that tone he always used when he was about to ask for money. A serious one. I kept my expression neutral, but my stomach started to knot. Over the past 3 years, there had been a dozen situations. Michael's business ventures that needed investors, unexpected medical bills that insurance supposedly wouldn't cover, car repairs that cost twice what any reasonable mechanic would charge. Each time I'd written the check because Lili would get that desperate look in her eyes, and I couldn't bear to see my only child suffer. But something felt different today, more urgent, more threatening. "We need $100,000, Lili blurted out, her words tumbling over each other. "By tomorrow." The number hit me like a physical blow. $100,000. That was more than all their previous requests combined. "What happened?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael's jaw tightened. "That's not important right now. What's important is that we get this money or we're going to lose everything." "Everything," I repeated, standing up slowly. My knees protested, a reminder that I was 64 years old and tired of these constant emergencies. Lili's eyes darted between Michael and me, and I saw something there that made my blood run cold. Fear, yes, but also something else. Resentment, like this was somehow my fault. "Dad, you don't understand," she said, stepping closer to Michael, seeking his protection rather than mine. "If we don't pay this debt, Michael's going to lose his business. We'll lose the house. Everything we've worked for. Worked for." The words stung because I knew the truth. I had paid for their house down payment. I had funded Michael's business twice when it was failing. I had been their safety net for so long that they'd forgotten what it felt like to stand on their own. "And if I can't help?" I asked quietly. That's when Michael's mask slipped completely. His eyes went cold, calculating. He looked at me the way a predator looks at wounded prey. "Well, Benjamin," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "you've got that pretty new Mercedes sitting in your driveway. Be a real shame if something happened to it." The words froze the air in the room. My Mercedes. The silver C-Class I'd bought myself just 6 months ago. The first major purchase I'd made for myself since Martha died 3 years ago. The car Martha had always dreamed of owning, but never got the chance to drive. "You're threatening me," I said, the words coming out flat and emotionless. "I'm stating facts," Michael replied, shrugging. "Give me the money tomorrow, or your car is done for. Your choice." I looked at Lili, waiting for her to say something. Waiting for her to tell her husband that threatening her father was crossing a line. Waiting for some sign that the daughter I'd raised still existed somewhere inside this cold stranger. Instead, she crossed her arms and lifted her chin defiantly. "Dad, just give us the money. You've got it. We know you've got it." The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could have. Not just that she was demanding the money, but that she was standing there, complicit in her husband's threat against me. Against the car that meant more to me than she could possibly understand. I sat back down in my recliner, suddenly feeling every one of my 64 years. You want to threaten me, your own father? Nobody's threatening anybody, Lili said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. We're desperate, Dad. We need help. Michael stepped forward again, and this time there was no pretense of politeness. Look, old man, this is simple. $100,000 tomorrow, or that fancy car of yours becomes scrap metal. We know you've got the money sitting in your accounts. You're being selfish. Selfish? The word echoed in my head as I stared at these two people who had once been my family. Selfish for buying myself one nice thing after a lifetime of sacrifice. Selfish for wanting to keep something that connected me to my late wife. Selfish for not immediately handing over a fortune to pay for their mistakes. I need time to think, I said finally. Michael's laugh was harsh and bitter. You've got until tomorrow at 5 o'clock. We'll be back for the money and the car title, just in case you try to be clever about this. They turned to leave, but Lili paused at the door. For a moment I thought she might say something kind. Maybe acknowledge that this wasn't right. Maybe apologize for what her husband had just done. Instead, she looked back at me with eyes that held no warmth, no love, no recognition of who I used to be to her. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Dad, she said softly. Just do the right thing. The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone in the sudden silence of my empty house. I sat there for a long time, staring at the space where my daughter had just stood, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. Outside, I could hear Michael's truck starting up, the engine revving louder than necessary as they drove away. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of my Mercedes in the driveway, its silver paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. 24 hours. That's all they'd given me to decide whether to hand over my life savings or watch them destroy the last piece of happiness I had left. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, something else began to take shape in my mind. Something they hadn't counted on when they'd walked into my house and threatened me. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. When the voice answered, I took a deep breath. Hello, this is Benjamin Morrison. I need to schedule an appointment. Tomorrow morning, if possible. It's urgent. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look in Lili's eyes when she demanded the money. Cold, calculating. Nothing like the little girl who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting that Daddy could fix everything. I found myself standing in the garage at 2 a.m, running my hand along the hood of my Mercedes. The metal was cool under my palm, and I could almost hear Martha's voice from that day 3 years ago, when we'd walked through the dealership together. Someday, Ben, she'd whispered, her fingers tracing the steering wheel of the exact model now sitting in my garage. When we retire, we'll get one just like this. We'll drive to the coast and watch the sunset. She never got that chance. The cancer took her 8 months later. When I finally bought the car last spring, I felt closer to Martha than I had since the funeral. Every time I drove it, I imagined her in the passenger seat, finally getting that coastal drive she'd dreamed about. It wasn't just a car to me. It was a promise kept, a dream fulfilled, a connection to the woman I'd loved for 37 years. Now my own daughter was threatening to take that away from me. I walked back into the house and pulled out the photo albums Martha had so carefully maintained. Page after page of Lili's childhood, birthday parties where I'd worked double shifts to afford the cake and presents, Christmas mornings where Martha and I had saved for months to put gifts under the tree, school events where I was the only parent cheering in the stands because I'd traded shifts with 3 different people to be there. After Martha died, it had been just Lili and me. She was 28 then, already married to Michael for a year. But she'd seemed to understand my grief. She'd visit twice a week, help me sort through Martha's things, sit with me during the worst of the lonely evenings. Or so I'd thought. Looking back now, I could see the signs I'd missed. How those visits always seemed to coincide with some financial need. How she'd grown impatient when I wanted to talk about her mother. How she'd started bringing Michael along, and how he'd wander through my house, commenting on the furniture, the artwork, asking casual questions about my finances. Dad, you really don't need this big house anymore, she'd said 6 months after the funeral. You should downsize, get something smaller, cheaper. Think of all the money you'd save. I'd thought she was concerned about me rattling around in a house full of memories. Now I realized she'd been calculating the value of my equity. The requests for money had started small. $500 for car repairs, $1,000 for medical bills, $2,000 when Michael's landscaping business hit a rough patch. Each time, Lili would get tears in her eyes, and I'd remember the little girl who'd cried when her goldfish died, and I'd write the check. But the amounts kept growing, and Lili's visits became less frequent, unless she needed something. The worst part was how Michael had slowly poisoned her against me. I'd watched it happen and felt powerless to stop it. He'd make little comments about how I was too set in my ways or didn't understand modern business. He'd roll his eyes when I tried to give advice, and soon Lili was rolling her eyes too. "Dad, things are different now," she'd say, when I'd suggest they budget more carefully or save for emergencies. Michael knows what he's doing. Michael, who had never held a steady job for more than 2 years. Michael, who talked big but had never actually succeeded at anything. Michael, who treated my daughter like a business partner instead of a wife, and treated me like a bank instead of a person. I closed the photo album and walked to the kitchen. In the drawer where Martha used to keep her recipes, I found the folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank statements, investment portfolios, insurance policies, all the paperwork that proved what Lili and Michael had clearly discovered. I did have the money they were demanding, the life insurance payout from Martha's policy, the retirement savings I'd been building for 40 years, the investments Martha and I had made, planning for our golden years together. It added up to just over $400,000, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life if I was careful. $100,000 would take a quarter of everything I had, and I knew it wouldn't be the last request. I thought about Martha's funeral, how Lili had sat beside me in the front pew, her hand in mine as we said goodbye to the woman who'd been the center of our world. I'd felt so grateful that day to have her there, to know that even though I was losing my wife, I still had my daughter. What a fool I'd been. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Lili, Dad, I know yesterday was hard. Michael gets intense when he's stressed, but we really do need this money. Please don't make us beg." I stared at the message for a long time. She was trying to soften the blow now, to make yesterday's threat seem like an aberration instead of a revelation of who they really were. Another message followed. "We'll pay you back as soon as Michael's business picks up. You know we're good for it. Good for it." They still owed me $12,000 from their last emergency 18 months ago. They'd never even mentioned paying it back until now. I set the phone down and walked to my computer. If they wanted to play games, I could play games too. But I had something they didn't expect. Time to think clearly and resources they didn't know about. I opened my browser and started researching Michael's landscaping business, his business license, his credit history. If I was going to hand over my life savings, I wanted to know exactly what kind of emergency required $100,000 overnight. What I found made my blood run cold. Michael's business had been operating without proper licenses for 6 months. He owed money to 3 different suppliers, all of whom had filed liens against him. His business credit was destroyed, and his personal credit wasn't much better. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the court document I found buried in the public records, a lawsuit filed against Michael's company for property damage. A client's yard had been destroyed by improper drainage work, causing flooding that damaged their house foundation. The lawsuit was seeking damages of $150,000. So that's what this was about. Not some sudden business emergency, not bad luck or unforeseen circumstances. Michael had screwed up, hurt someone else's property, and now needed money to avoid being sued into bankruptcy. And he was perfectly willing to threaten and extort his father-in-law to get it. I printed out the court documents and sat back in my chair. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock, they'd be back for their money. They expected me to roll over and pay up the way I always had before. They had no idea that this time I'd be ready for them. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. It was 8:30 in the morning, and the caller ID showed the number I'd called the night before. Mr. Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Fraud Division. You called about needing to discuss a potential extortion case? I took a deep breath, thinking of Lili as a little girl, trusting me to protect her from the monsters in her closet. I'd never imagined that one day I'd need protection from her. Yes, I said quietly. I think my son-in-law is trying to extort money from me, and my daughter is helping him do it. Detective Chen arrived at my house that Wednesday morning looking nothing like what I'd expected. She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and a gentle voice that put me at ease immediately. When I offered her coffee, she accepted and sat at my kitchen table like an old friend, rather than a law enforcement officer. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a small notebook. "Start from the beginning." I told her about yesterday's visit, about the threats to my car, about the pattern of financial requests that had been escalating for months. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never making me feel foolish for being manipulated by my own family. "You mentioned you found some court documents?" she asked when I finished. I handed her the printouts I'd discovered during my late-night research. She studied them carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. "Mr. Morrison, this is worse than simple extortion," she said finally. "Your son-in-law is facing a significant lawsuit, and based on these financial records, he doesn't have the assets to pay if he loses. He's essentially trying to use your money to cover damages he caused through negligent business practices. Is that illegal?" "The extortion part certainly is. Threatening to destroy your property unless you give him money? That's a felony." He looked up from the documents. "But I'm wondering if there's more to this story. Mind if I make some calls?" While Detective Chen worked her phone in the living room, I sat at my kitchen table trying to process everything. Yesterday I'd thought I was dealing with a desperate son-in-law and a daughter who'd lost her way. Now it seemed like I might be dealing with something much more calculated and cruel. An hour later, Detective Chen returned to the kitchen with a grim expression. "Mr. Morrison, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Has your son-in-law ever asked specific questions about your financial accounts? Bank names, account numbers, investment details?" The question hit me like a cold wind. Why would that matter? Because I just spoke with a colleague in the Financial Crimes Unit. Michael Garrett, that's your son-in-law's full name, he's been flagged by 2 different banks for suspicious activity. Attempted account access using information that wasn't his. My mouth went dry. "You're saying he tried to steal from me?" "I'm saying he tried to access accounts that weren't his using personal information that he shouldn't have had. The attempts were unsuccessful, but they raised red flags." He leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, when was the last time you checked your credit report?" I hadn't checked it in months, maybe longer. Martha had always handled those details, and after she died, I'd been overwhelmed by everything else. Detective Chen helped me access the reports online, and what we found made my hands shake. 3 credit inquiries in the past 6 months, all unauthorized. Someone had tried to open credit cards in my name. Someone had attempted to take out a home equity loan against my house. All the attempts had been denied because of security measures I'd put in place after Martha's death. But the intent was clear. Michael hadn't just been planning to extort me. He'd been trying to steal from me for months. "There's something else," Detective Chen said quietly. "The lawsuit against his company? It's not his first. I found 2 other cases from the past 3 years, both settled out of court, both for significant amounts. Your son-in-law has a pattern of cutting corners on jobs and then dealing with the consequences later." I felt sick. All those times I'd given them money for emergencies. How many of those had actually been payoffs for Michael's sloppy work? "What about Lili?" I asked. "Is she involved in this, or is she just—" "That's what we need to find out." Detective Chen closed her notebook. "Mr. Morrison, I want to suggest something, but it's going to be difficult for you. We need to set up a situation where we can record them making these threats. Get them on tape demanding money and threatening your property. The idea of deliberately putting myself in harm's way, of using my own daughter as bait in a police investigation, made me feel sick. But then I thought about the Mercedes in my garage and what it meant to me, and what they were willing to do to take it away. What do I need to do?" Detective Chen explained the plan. I would call Lili and Michael, tell them I had the money ready, and arrange for them to come pick it up. We'd set up recording equipment in my house and have plainclothes officers nearby. When they made their threats explicit, we'd have evidence. But what if they just take the money and leave? I asked. We're not going to give them any money, Detective Chen said. We're going to give them something that will expose exactly what kind of people they are. That afternoon, I made the call. Michael answered on the second ring. Benjamin, I was hoping you'd come to your senses. I have the money, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. $100,000, just like you asked. Smart man. We'll be there at 5 o'clock, just like we said. Michael, I said, following Detective Chen's script, I need to know this is the last time. I can't keep doing this. His laugh was cold. Benjamin, let's be honest. You're going to keep helping us as long as we need help. That's what fathers do for their daughters, right? And if I refuse in the future, let's just say you're really fond of that car of yours. Be a shame if something happened to it, or to this nice house. Accidents happen all the time. My hands clenched around the phone. He wasn't even trying to hide the threats anymore. We'll see you at 5, he said, and hung up. Detective Chen, who'd been listening on another line, nodded grimly. We got it. That was a clear threat of property destruction in exchange for money. That's felony extortion. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Detective Chen's team installed tiny recording devices throughout my living room. They positioned unmarked cars on my street. They briefed me on what to say and what not to say. But as 5 o'clock approached, I found myself thinking less about the police operation and more about the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap watching television. The daughter who'd cried at Martha's funeral and promised she'd never leave me alone. At 4:55, I heard Michael's truck in my driveway. Through the window, I watched them get out. Lili looked nervous, constantly glancing around as if she sensed something was wrong. Michael strode toward my front door with the confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards. They knocked, and I opened the door with an envelope in my hand. Dad, Lili said, her voice softer than it had been yesterday. Thank you for doing this. I know it's not easy. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and tried to find some trace of the person I'd raised, some hint of remorse or guilt or recognition that what they were doing was wrong. Instead, I saw her eyes fixed on the envelope in my hand, calculating and eager. Come in, I said, stepping back. We need to talk before I give you this. Michael pushed past me into the living room. What's to talk about? You've got the money. We need the money. Simple transaction. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the couch. Both of you. They exchanged a look, but sat. I remained standing, the envelope still in my hand. Before I give you this, I said slowly, I want to understand something. What happens next time you need money? Michael shrugged. We'll ask nicely, just like we did this time. And if I say no? His expression hardened. Benjamin, you're not going to say no. You're going to keep helping us because you love your daughter, and because you know what happens to people who don't cooperate. What happens? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael stood up, stepping closer to me. Well, like I said yesterday, that's a beautiful car you've got out there. Be a real shame if someone took a baseball bat to it, or if someone broke into this house and trashed the place. Crime is getting bad in this neighborhood. Lili didn't say anything to stop him. She just sat there watching, complicit in every threat. You're threatening me, I said. I'm protecting my family, Michael replied. And you're going to keep protecting yours, right? By giving us what we need, when we need it. I nodded slowly and held out the envelope. Then take this. Michael snatched it from my hand and tore it open. His face went from triumphant to confused to furious in the span of 3 seconds. What the hell is this? He shouted, holding up the papers inside. I smiled for the first time in days. It's exactly what you deserve. Michael's face turned red as he stared at the papers in his hands. The first document was a restraining order signed by a judge that morning, prohibiting him from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. The second was a cease and desist letter from my attorney demanding he stop all attempts to access my financial accounts. But it was the third document that made him start shaking with rage. What is this? He whispered, his voice dangerous and low. That, I said calmly, is a copy of the complaint filed against you by Jennifer Walsh. You remember Jennifer, don't you, Michael? The woman whose yard you destroyed with your sloppy drainage work? The one who's suing you for $150,000? Lili grabbed the papers from Michael's hands, her eyes scanning them quickly. I watched as comprehension dawned on her face, followed by something I hadn't seen from her in years. Shame. Dad, how did you get these? They're public record, Lili. Your husband's business disasters are available for anyone to see if they know where to look. I took a step back, putting distance between us, just like his credit report and the bank records showing he tried to access my accounts 3 times in the past 6 months. Michael's face went from red to pale in an instant. You don't know what you're talking about, old man. Don't I? I pulled out my phone and played the recording Detective Chen had helped me make of yesterday's conversation. Michael's voice filled the room, clear and threatening. Give me the money tomorrow, or your car's done for. Dad, stop, Lili said, her voice shaking. Just stop this. But I wasn't stopping, not anymore. Did you know your husband tried to steal from me, Lili? Did you know he's been attempting identity theft for months? I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign that she was an innocent victim in all this. Or were you helping him? I never helped him steal anything, she said quickly. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. But you knew, I said quietly. You knew he was in trouble with this lawsuit, and you knew he needed money to pay it off. That's why you came here demanding $100,000 with threats and ultimatums. Michael stepped toward me, his fists clenched. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just humiliate us and walk away? Michael, don't, Lili warned. But there was something in her voice that chilled me. Not concern for my safety, but fear that he was about to make their situation worse. What are you going to do, Michael? I asked, standing my ground. Hit me? Threaten me some more? Destroy my property like you promised? He took another step forward, and that's when Detective Chen emerged from the kitchen where she'd been listening to everything. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mr. Garrett, she said, her badge clearly visible. You're already looking at felony extortion charges. Assault would just make things worse. The color drained from both their faces. Lili looked like she was going to be sick. You called the police on us, she whispered. On your own daughter? I called the police on a man who threatened to destroy my property unless I gave him money, I said. I called the police on someone who tried to steal my identity and access my bank accounts. The fact that he's married to my daughter doesn't change what he did. Detective Chen stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. Michael Garrett, you're under arrest for extortion and attempted identity theft. Wait, Lili said, panic creeping into her voice. Wait, this is all a misunderstanding. Michael never meant to hurt anyone. He's just stressed about money. Ma'am, we have recordings of him threatening your father's property unless money was paid. That's not stress. That's a crime. As Detective Chen read Michael his rights, he turned to me with pure hatred in his eyes. This isn't over, Benjamin. You think you've won something here? You just destroyed your own family. No, I said quietly. You did that when you decided to treat me like a bank instead of a person. Lili watched in horror as they led Michael away in handcuffs. When it was just the two of us left in the living room, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. How could you do this to us? She sobbed. He's my husband. You just ruined our lives. I sat down heavily in my recliner, suddenly feeling exhausted. Lili, sit down, please. She remained standing, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. Your husband has been lying to you, I said gently. This isn't his first lawsuit. It's his third in as many years. He has a pattern of doing sloppy work and then trying to cover up the consequences. That's not true. I pulled out the other documents Detective Chen had helped me find. Here are the records from his previous cases. 2 settlements, both for tens of thousands of dollars. Where do you think that money came from, Lili? She finally sat down, taking the papers with trembling hands. As she read, I watched her face change. The defensive anger slowly gave way to confusion, then to a dawning realization of how thoroughly she'd been deceived. He told me these were just business disputes, she whispered. He said the other parties were being unreasonable. And the money I gave you over the past 2 years, the $12,000 for emergency medical bills, the $8,000 for equipment repairs? Lili was crying openly now. I thought you were helping us build our future together. I was helping your husband pay off the people he'd cheated or hurt. I leaned forward. Lili, did you know he tried to access my bank accounts? She shook her head, violently. No, I swear I didn't know about that. I wanted to believe her. Looking at her now, crying and broken, she looked like the little girl I'd raised again. But I'd been fooled before. The credit card applications in my name, the attempt to take out a home equity loan on my house, I don't know anything about that, she said, her voice barely audible. Dad, I swear to you, I thought the money problems were just bad luck, bad timing. I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of deception. What I saw instead was a woman who'd been manipulated and used, just like I had been. Lili, when did you stop trusting me? The question seemed to surprise her. What do you mean? When did you start believing that I was selfish for wanting to keep some of my own money? When did you start thinking that I owed you and Michael my life savings? She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and ashamed. Michael said you were hoarding money while we struggled. He said you could afford to help us more than you were doing. He said you were being selfish by buying that car when we needed help. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. It was easier than admitting that my husband was failing at everything he tried. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I wanted to reach out to her. Part of me wanted to forgive her immediately, to tell her everything would be okay, that we could fix this. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt and threatened and betrayed, wasn't ready to let go of the pain yet. Lili, I need you to understand something. What you and Michael did to me yesterday wasn't just asking for help. It was threatening me. It was trying to force me to give up something that means everything to me. The car, she said quietly. It's not just a car. It's the last connection I have to your mother. It's the dream she never got to live. My voice broke slightly, and you were willing to let him destroy it to get what you wanted. Lili put her head in her hands and sobbed. I didn't know. I didn't understand what it meant to you. You didn't ask. You didn't care enough to ask. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us like a wall. Finally, Lili looked up at me. What happens now? What happens to Michael? That depends on what the district attorney decides to do with the charges. But Lili, you need to understand something. This marriage isn't going to survive this. Michael is facing serious legal consequences, and even if he manages to avoid prison time, his business is finished. He's going to be dealing with lawsuits and financial problems for years. Are you saying I should leave him? I took a deep breath. I'm saying you need to decide what kind of person you want to be. Do you want to be someone who stands by a man who threatens and manipulates people? Or do you want to be the daughter I raised who knows right from wrong? Lili stood up slowly, wiping her eyes. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, I said. But Lili, if you choose to stand by Michael after this, if you choose to blame me for what happened here today, then you're choosing to cut me out of your life, because I won't let anyone threaten me again, not even family. She nodded, her face pale but resolute. I understand. After she left, I sat alone in my living room, listening to the silence. Outside, my Mercedes gleamed in the driveway, safe and untouched. Inside, the house felt different somehow, emptier but also cleaner, like a poison had been drawn out. I didn't know if my daughter would choose to come back to me, or if she'd choose to stay loyal to the man who had been using both of us. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The threats were over. The manipulation was over. Whatever happened next would be Lili's choice, and I could live with whatever she decided. I was finally free. 3 days passed without a word from Lili. 3 days of checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for a text message or missed call that never came. Part of me worried that she'd chosen Michael over me, that the daughter I'd raised was truly gone forever. But another part of me felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. No one was demanding money from me. No one was threatening my property. No one was making me feel guilty for wanting to keep what I'd worked my entire life to earn. For the first time since Martha died, I felt like I could make plans for my own future without someone else's crisis derailing them. Detective Chen called on Friday morning with an update. Michael made bail, but he's got conditions. He can't contact you or come within 500 feet of your property. The district attorney is moving forward with the extortion charges, and we've got solid evidence. What about the identity theft? That's trickier to prove, but we're building a case. The banks have security footage of him at ATMs trying to use information that wasn't his. It's going to take time, but we've got a good shot at making those charges stick too. After I hung up, I found myself thinking about the future. For 3 years since Martha's death, I'd been drifting, going through the motions of living without really having anything to look forward to. Now, suddenly, I felt like I could see possibilities again. I walked out to the garage and ran my hand along the hood of my Mercedes, Martha's dream car, our dream that I'd finally made real. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd take that drive to the coast we'd always planned. I'd watch the sunset and tell her about everything that had happened. That afternoon, as I was washing the car in my driveway, a familiar vehicle pulled up to the curb. My heart skipped when I saw Lili get out, but something was different about her. She looked smaller somehow, less confident. She was walking slowly, like someone who wasn't sure of her welcome. "Dad?" she called out hesitantly. I turned off the hose and faced her. "Lili." She stood at the edge of my driveway, not presuming to come closer without invitation. "Can we talk?" I nodded and gestured toward the front porch. We sat on the steps where she used to sit as a little girl, eating popsicles and telling me about her day at school. "I left him," she said without preamble. The words hit me like a physical blow. Relief, sadness, hope, and worry all crashed together in my chest. "When?" "Yesterday. I packed my things while he was meeting with his lawyer." She looked down at her hands. "Dad, I found more things. Bad things." I waited, giving her space to tell me in her own time. "I went through his files, his computer, everything. You were right about the lawsuits. There were others you didn't even know about. Small claims, mostly, but a pattern of people saying he didn't finish jobs or damaged their property." Her voice was shaking. "And I found evidence that he'd been planning this for months." "Planning what?" Lili pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "These are between Michael and his brother. Look at the dates." The messages went back 6 months. I read them with growing horror and disgust. "The old man's got more money than he knows what to do with," one message read. "Lili says he's got at least 400 grand in investments." "Time to start collecting," came the reply. "I've been working on her. She's starting to see him as selfish for not helping us more." Dumb message after message, laying out a calculated plan to manipulate both Lili and me, to isolate me from my daughter, and then use her to extract money from me systematically. "There's more," Lili said, scrolling down. "Look at this one from last month. If he doesn't cooperate, we'll have to get creative. Lili says he loves that stupid car more than anything. Might be useful leverage." I felt sick reading it. The casual way they discussed threatening me, manipulating my daughter, destroying something precious to me. Like I was nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. "Lili," I said quietly, "how long have you known about these messages?" "I found them Wednesday night after they arrested Michael. I couldn't sleep, so I went through his phone while he was in jail." She was crying now. "Dad, I was so stupid. I believed everything he told me about you. I thought you were being selfish and cruel when you were just trying to protect yourself." I wanted to comfort her, but I was still processing the betrayal. Not just Michael's betrayal of me, but his betrayal of her. He'd used her love for him to turn her into a weapon against her own father. "There's something else you need to know," she continued, "about the money we asked you for before. The $12,000 for medical bills, the $8,000 for equipment. None of that was real." Oh, my stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "The medical bills were fabricated. Michael created fake invoices and statements to show me. The equipment repairs never happened. Every time we came to you for money, it was to pay off someone Michael had cheated or to cover his gambling debts." Gambling debts? That was new information. "He has a gambling problem, Dad, a serious one. He's been going to the casino twice a week for over a year. That's where most of the money you gave us went." I sat back against the porch railing, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Every dollar I'd given them, thinking I was helping my daughter build a life with her husband, had actually been funding his addictions and covering up his failures. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" I asked. Because I didn't know. Michael handled all our finances. He told me we were struggling because business was slow, because the economy was bad, because equipment kept breaking down. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And because he kept telling me you could afford to help us more than you were. He made me feel guilty for not asking you for more. I thought about all the times she'd seemed reluctant when asking for money, how she'd apologize and promise to pay me back. I'd thought it was just her natural pride. Now I realized it was because she was fighting against the manipulation, even as she fell victim to it. Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you terribly, but I need you to know that I never wanted to threaten you or make you feel unsafe in your own home. But you stood there and let him do it, I said, and my voice was harder than I'd intended. She flinched. I know I did, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. In that moment, I was so desperate and scared that I convinced myself you were being unreasonable. Michael had spent months telling me that you didn't really need the money, that you were just being stubborn. And now I see that you were protecting yourself from someone who was trying to rob you, someone who was willing to destroy the things you cared about most to get what he wanted. She looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the little girl she used to be. Dad, can you ever forgive me? I stared at my daughter for a long moment. The rational part of my mind knew that she'd been manipulated, that Michael had spent months poisoning her against me and conditioning her to see me as an obstacle rather than a person who loved her. But the hurt part of my mind remembered the coldness in her eyes when she demanded the money, the way she'd stood silent while her husband threatened me. Lili, I want to forgive you. I do. But I need to know that you understand what happened here wasn't just a misunderstanding or a moment of desperation. You allowed yourself to be turned against me. You believed the worst about me instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt. I know, she whispered, and you need to understand that I can't go back to the way things were. I can't go back to being your emergency fund or your solution to every crisis. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be as two adults who respect each other, not as a daughter who sees her father as a resource to be exploited. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I don't want your money, Dad. I don't want anything from you except maybe someday a chance to be your daughter again. The words broke something open in my chest. I reached over and took her hand, and for the first time in years, it felt like I was touching my real daughter instead of the stranger she'd become. Where are you staying? I asked. With Sarah from work. She's letting me sleep on her couch until I figure things out. And Michael? He's been calling and texting constantly, apologizing, making promises, saying he'll change. She shook her head. But I've seen who he really is now. I've seen how he talks about people when he thinks no one is listening. He doesn't love me, Dad. He never did. I was just useful to him. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing everything that had been said. Finally, Lili spoke again. Dad, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but can I ask you one question? What? The car? Will you tell me why it means so much to you? I want to understand what Michael was threatening to take away from you. I looked out at my Mercedes, gleaming in the afternoon sun, and thought about how to explain it to her. Your mother and I used to drive past the Mercedes dealership every Sunday after church. She'd always slow down and look at the cars in the showroom, and she'd say, Someday, Ben, when we retire, we'll get one of those and drive to the ocean. My voice caught slightly. She never got that chance. When I bought the car, it wasn't just for me, it was for her. It was keeping a promise I made to her. Lili's face crumpled, and I was going to let him destroy it. You didn't know, I said, and realized I meant it. Michael made sure you didn't know what it meant to me, because then you might have stopped him. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so incredibly sorry. I squeezed her hand. I know you are. And Lili, I love you. I never stopped loving you, even when I was angry and hurt and scared. You're still my daughter. She leaned against my shoulder and cried, and I held her like I used to when she was small and the world had been cruel to her. But this time, I wasn't just comforting her. I was also protecting myself, making sure that love didn't blind me to the need for boundaries and caution, because I'd learned the hard way that love alone wasn't enough to keep people from hurting you. Sometimes love required strength and distance and the courage to say no. But sitting there with my daughter, feeling like I'd gotten a piece of my family back, I also felt something else. Hope that maybe with time and effort and mutual respect, we could build something new together, something stronger than what we'd had before. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my house making coffee for two. Through the window, I could see Lili's used Honda Civic parked next to my Mercedes in the driveway. She'd bought the car with money from her new job at an accounting firm, refusing my offer to help with the down payment. "I need to do this myself, Dad," she'd said, and I'd been proud of her for saying it. The past half year had been a slow, careful process of rebuilding trust. Lili visited every other Sunday, always calling first, never presuming she was welcome without invitation. We'd developed new rituals, cooking dinner together, watching old movies, working in the garden Martha had loved so much. But it was different now, better in some ways. We talked to each other as equals instead of me being the perpetual father protector and her being the eternal child recipient. She'd kept her word about not asking for money. When her divorce lawyer required a retainer she couldn't afford, she'd taken out a loan rather than come to me. When her apartment needed a security deposit, she'd worked overtime for weeks to save up the funds. I watched her struggle sometimes and fought the impulse to intervene, remembering Detective Chen's advice. The best gift you can give her is the chance to solve her own problems. Michael had pled guilty to the extortion charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd served 4 months in county jail and was now on probation, forbidden from contacting either Lili or me. The civil lawsuit from the property damage was still working its way through the courts, and according to Lili's divorce attorney, Michael would likely be paying that debt for years to come. Lili entered the kitchen carrying a small wrapped package. "Happy birthday, Dad." I'd almost forgotten. 65 years old today, Martha would have made a fuss, invited neighbors over, baked her famous chocolate cake. This year, I'd planned to let the day pass quietly. "You didn't need to get me anything," I said, accepting the gift. "I wanted to." She sat down at the kitchen table. "Open it." Inside the wrapping was a small wooden picture frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before. It showed Martha and me standing next to a silver Mercedes in a dealership showroom. We were both grinning, Martha's hands pressed against the driver's side window like a child at a candy store. I had no memory of the photo being taken. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "I've had it for years. Mom gave it to me before she died, along with a note." Lili reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She wanted me to give it to you when you bought the car, but after everything that happened with Michael, I forgot about it." With trembling hands, I unfolded Martha's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Ben, if you're reading this, it means you finally bought our dream car. I'm so proud of you for keeping this promise, even without me there to enjoy it with you. Every time you drive it, know that I'm in the passenger seat, holding your hand and watching the world go by. Love, always, Martha." I had to set the note down because my hands were shaking too much to hold it steady. "Dad, are you okay?" I nodded, wiping my eyes. Somehow she knew I'd need this. "Mom always knew what people needed," Lili said softly. "I think that's why she wrote so many letters before she died. She was trying to take care of us even after she was gone." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both of us thinking about Martha. Finally, Lili spoke again. "Dad, I have something else to tell you. I've been seeing a therapist." I looked up, concerned. "Is everything all right?" "I'm working through some things about the marriage, about what happened between us, about why I was so easily manipulated." He traced patterns on the table with her finger. "Dr. Rodriguez says I have something called people-pleasing behavior. I was so afraid of conflict, so desperate to keep Michael happy, that I stopped thinking for myself." "And is it helping? The therapy?" "I think so. It's hard, looking at the choices I made and understanding why I made them, but I'm learning to trust my own judgment again." She looked up at me. "Dr. Rodriguez wants me to ask you something." "What's that?" "She wants to know if you'd be willing to come to a session with me, not because there's anything wrong, but because she thinks it might help us communicate better as we rebuild our relationship. A year ago, the suggestion would have seemed absurd. Benjamin Morrison going to therapy to discuss his feelings with a stranger? But the past months had taught me that sometimes the old ways of doing things weren't the best ways. If you think it would help, I'm willing to try. Lily's face lit up. Really? Really, but I have a condition. Her expression grew wary. What? Today is my birthday, and I've decided to take that drive to the coast that your mother and I always planned. I'd like you to come with me. Dad, I'd love to, but I have to work tomorrow and... Call in sick, I said, surprising both of us with my boldness. Sometimes you have to choose what's important over what's expected. She grinned, and for a moment she looked exactly like the little girl who used to beg me to let her stay up past her bedtime. Okay, let's go to the coast. An hour later, we were driving west on Highway 60 with the windows down and Martha's favorite music playing on the radio. Lili had packed sandwiches and drinks, and I'd brought the photograph she'd given me, propped up on the dashboard where Martha could see the road ahead. Tell me about when you and Mom were young, Lili said as we drove through the rolling hills outside the city. Tell me stories I haven't heard before. So I did. I told her about the night I proposed to Martha in a rainstorm, because I couldn't wait for better weather. I told her about how Martha had wanted to name her Michael if she'd been a boy, which made us both laugh given recent events. I told her about the time Martha had tried to surprise me with a home-cooked anniversary dinner and accidentally given us both food poisoning. She was terrible in the kitchen when we first got married, I said, but she was determined to learn. She practiced making your favorite cookies at least 50 times before she got them right. I remember those cookies, Lili said. She made them for every birthday, every school event, every time I was sad about something. Showed she wanted to be the kind of mother who could fix anything with baked goods and hugs. She was, Lili said quietly. I just forgot that for a while. We reached the coast just as the sun was beginning to set. I parked the Mercedes on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, and we sat on the hood eating our sandwiches and watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. Dad, Lili said, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared into the ocean, do you think Mom would be proud of us for finding our way back to each other? I thought about Martha's letter, about her belief that I would keep my promises even without her there to remind me, about her faith that love could survive even the worst mistakes. I think she'd be proud of you for having the courage to leave a bad situation and start over, I said. And I think she'd be proud of me for finally learning to set boundaries without losing hope. Even after everything I did, I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was thinner than she'd been during her marriage, but there was a strength in her face that hadn't been there before, a clarity that came from facing hard truths and choosing the difficult path forward. Especially after everything you did, it's easy to love someone who never makes mistakes. It takes real character to love someone who messes up and then does the work to make it right. She leaned against my shoulder, and we watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. What happens now? She asked. Now we take it one day at a time. We keep talking to each other. We keep being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. We remember that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice we make every day. And if I mess up again, then we'll deal with it when it happens. But Lili, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life waiting for you to disappoint me. I'm going to trust that you've learned from this experience and that you'll make better choices going forward. I will, she said firmly. I promise I will. As we drove home that night, I thought about how much had changed since that terrible day when Michael and Lili had walked into my house demanding money. I'd lost my illusions about family being unconditionally loyal and protective. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to stand up for myself and that real love could survive even the deepest betrayals. My Mercedes hummed smoothly along the highway, carrying us both toward whatever came next. In the passenger seat, Lili dozed with Martha's photograph clutched in her hands. In the rear-view mirror, I could see the ocean disappearing behind us, but I wasn't sad to leave it. We'd be back. Some promises take longer to keep than others, but they're worth the wait. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was looking forward to the journey. I had my memories of Martha, my relationship with Lili slowly healing, and my hard-won knowledge that I deserved to be treated with respect and kindness. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the best way to love someone is to refuse to let them treat you badly. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is to say no. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to face the consequences of their choices and grow from them. As we pulled into my driveway that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete peace with my life and my choices. The house was mine, the car was mine, and my relationship with my daughter was built on honesty and mutual respect rather than guilt and obligation. I was finally, truly free.